The air inside the UN Assembly Hall was thick with anticipation, yet it wasn't the usual diplomatic tension that held the room in a vice. No, this was different. The hum of the massive Galactic Council flagship orbiting Earth outside was felt deep in the bones of everyone present. Captain Mara Quinn stood at the front of the room, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that flickered above the podium. It projected the massive, silent shape of the ship, an intimidating display of alien technology, meant to impress, to instill fear. But Mara wasn't impressed. She wasn't afraid. "Captain Quinn," said Ambassador Louis Jean, the UN Secretary-General, his voice strained with concern. "This is it. This meeting will decide the future of Earth. I hope you're prepared." Mara's gaze never wavered from the hologram. She could already hear the voices of the Council in her head, calm, calculated, dismissive. They had already decided. Humans were nothing more than a problem to be managed, a species with potential, yes, but without the maturity to truly take their place in the cosmos. The Council was here to force them into compliance, whether Earth wanted it or not. "I'm prepared," Mara replied, her voice low but firm, like steel wrapped in velvet. She turned away from the display, looking into the eyes of those in the room. Earth's finest minds, their futures now tied to the whims of beings far older and far more powerful than any human could imagine. Louis gave her a tight nod and sat down. His words had been a reminder, not a request for assurance. The Council had arrived with their terms, an agreement that would alter humanity's future forever. The large doors of the Assembly Hall slid open, and the Council delegation entered. Their presence filled the room immediately, an oppressive weight carried by their silence. Chancellor Jackson Malix led the procession. His appearance was as alien as his intentions. His tall, translucent form shimmered in the dim light, his 6 eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. His species, the Chazsari, had no need for breath, no need for food, no need for any of the things that bound humans to the earth. His race had long since abandoned such mortal concerns, and in their place, they held only their cold, unflinching need for order. "Captain Quinn," Jaxer spoke first, his voice a smooth, mechanical hum. "You know why we are here." Mara crossed her arms, standing tall, her heart racing but her posture unwavering. "Yes, I know," she said, her words clear and deliberate. "You've come to give us your terms." Jaxer inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement, but little more. "The Galactic Council has studied your species closely. It has come to our attention that Earth's technological progress, while promising, is also unstable. You are not yet capable of managing the galactic responsibilities that come with joining the Council. We have, therefore, outlined a path for your people." Mara met his gaze. "A path?" she asked. "Or a leash?" The room tensed, and the murmurs of Earth's delegates hushed. Jaxer's eyes narrowed, but the tension in the air barely seemed to affect him. "A leash?" he repeated, his voice almost amused. "A crude way of putting it, Captain. But yes, you may think of it that way. The path we offer Earth is one of security. Peace. We would guide you, protect you from the chaos that lies beyond your borders. But in return, you will surrender your autonomy. You will follow the rules set forth by the Council." A few of the human delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mara wasn't one of them. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "And what are these rules?" she asked. Jaxer didn't hesitate. "First, you will cease any further advancements in military technology. Your current capabilities are primitive, but they are dangerous. We will monitor and regulate your research into space-faring weapons. Second, you will adhere to the Council's trade laws. You will not engage with species outside our purview, nor will you develop any independent alliances. Third, you will submit to the Council's laws on resource management. Your planet's resources, your genetic diversity, and your environment will fall under our jurisdiction." Mara clenched her fists, the words biting into her like acid. "And if we refuse?" Jaxer's expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the weight of his next words. "If you refuse, Earth will be isolated. You will not be permitted to travel beyond your solar system. You will be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The Council will take steps to ensure your compliance, one way or another. A chill fell over the room. Earth's leaders had long feared this moment, but now it was real. They were faced with a decision that could determine whether humanity would rise among the stars or be forever bound to the dirt and soil of their home planet. Mara's voice broke the silence. You don't understand us at all, she said, the words sharp and deliberate. You think you can control us, dictate our future, limit our potential. But you're wrong. We're not some race of complacent creatures, ready to kneel at your feet. We will not be bound by your laws. We will not accept your limits. Jax's eyes flashed. For the briefest moment, a flicker of something, was it frustration, crossed his features. But then it was gone, replaced by the cold, unwavering resolve of someone who had lived longer than most of the galaxy's civilizations combined. Then you will suffer the consequences, Captain Quinn. This is not a negotiation. This is the future of your people. Mara took a slow breath, fighting the urge to respond in kind. She could feel the weight of her people's hopes and fears on her shoulders, but her mind was clear. She knew what had to be done. Your future, she said quietly, is not our future. And we will not be shackled by your idea of what we should be. Chancellor Jaxo studied her for a moment, and then, without another word, he turned and left the room, his delegation following behind. As the doors closed behind them, Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The next few hours would be critical. Earth would have to make its stand. There was no going back now. The decision had been made. And Earth would not kneel. The echoes of the Galactic Council's ultimatum lingered in the dimly lit war room. The holotable flickered with projections of Earth's current capabilities, military assets, and a representation of the Galactic Council's fleet, silent, menacing, hovering just outside Earth's atmosphere. Captain Mara Quinn leaned over the table, her eyes scanning the data, her mind racing. The room was heavy with the weight of the decision. Ambassador Louis Zhang, seated at the far end of the table, was the first to speak. You've seen the Council's terms. They've given us a choice: submit or be isolated. No trade, no travel, no allies. Earth would be alone. Mara didn't look up. There's no choice. The Council's terms are a prison dressed as protection. Captain, we're talking about the Council, General Alec Reyes said, his voice cautious. They can destroy us, isolate us, cut us off from every resource we've ever relied on. They're not bluffing. I know they're not bluffing, Mara said flatly. Her eyes flicked to the hologram, where Earth's space stations and military defenses looked minuscule next to the vastness of the Council's fleet. But we have to make them understand. We will not submit. There was a pause, the silence oppressive. Luis cleared his throat. We've been pushing back on their demands for hours. They're not backing down. What's our next move, Mara? She straightened up, a fire sparking in her chest. We fight for our independence. Not just for Earth's freedom, but for every species the Council thinks they can control. If we fall, others will follow. It's time we show them humanity's true strength. General Reyes, a seasoned veteran of the Earth Defense Forces, leaned forward. You're talking about open defiance. We don't have the military to fight them directly. Not yet. We need more time, more firepower. Mara shot him a look. We don't need firepower. We need will. I've seen how we can improvise. Humans have always been good at that. Luis looked skeptical. You think we can just, what? Outmaneuver them? The Council's resources are. We'll create the time we need, Mara interrupted. By showing them we won't be intimidated. We'll fight their regulations with everything we have. Her mind raced as she looked at the map of Earth, of the ships, the technologies still in development. If the Council was expecting Earth to cower, they would be sorely mistaken. Humanity had an unquantifiable edge. They could adapt. Fast. I've been in contact with our allies in the belt, she said, turning to face the others. Not everyone in the galaxy is keen on the Council's rule. There's a movement growing, groups pushing back against their control. We're not alone in this. General Reyes raised an eyebrow. You're talking about the Outer Rim factions? The independent colonies? They've never had the resources to go up against the Council. Mara nodded, eyes intense. They don't need to. They just need to make noise. Help us disrupt the Council's focus, give them something else to think about. Earth won't face them alone. Luis shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. And if this backfires, if the Council decides we're a bigger problem than we're worth, we'll make them understand that Earth can't be controlled, Mara said, her voice unwavering. We've already won half the battle by refusing to bow. The rest will follow. Minutes later, Mara stood before a new holographic projection, this one of Earth's fleet. It was a skeleton compared to the full might of the Council's forces, but it had something the Council didn't: unpredictability. Mara ran her fingers over the controls, pulling up the latest data from the Belt's resistance networks. Scattered ships, half-finished space stations, but they had one advantage. They knew the Council's tactics, their weaknesses. We need to hit them where it hurts, Mara said, speaking to the group as her fingers danced across the hologram. Disrupt their comms. Hijack their sensors. If we can break through their intel network, we'll gain enough time to rally our forces. Luis looked up, his face a mix of uncertainty and awe. We're talking about attacking the Council's ships directly. They'll have us neutralized before we can blink. Not if we keep them guessing. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we vanish before they can react, Mara said, her voice sharp. The first attack won't be about winning. It's about sending a message. The general leaned back, folding his arms. A message that Earth isn't ready to surrender. Exactly, Mara confirmed, turning her gaze toward the massive holographic fleet. She was already calculating. The resistance networks would play a vital role, but Earth's own ingenuity could tip the balance. If they could keep the Council off balance for just a few days, maybe long enough to make the Council rethink their approach. All right, General Reyes said. We move at dawn. We'll need every available ship, every soldier. Mara gave a small nod. I'll personally oversee the first strike. We'll hit their primary relay station in orbit. If we can disable their communications, we'll slow them down long enough to get more resistance ships into position. Luis's brow furrowed. You're suggesting we attack the most heavily guarded ship in their fleet? Yes, Mara said, a spark of defiance in her eyes. We're humans. We don't back down just because it's hard. The meeting broke up shortly after, but the tension remained. In the hours leading up to the strike, Mara couldn't shake the feeling of what was at stake. They weren't just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for their place in the universe. The Council had underestimated humanity's will, and that would be their downfall. At the helm of the flagship, Mara stood poised as the first wave of ships departed, cutting through the stars with lethal precision. The Council wouldn't know what hit them. This wasn't just about survival. It was about making the galaxy recognize humanity's strength. In the darkness of space, Earth made its first stand. A message sent across the stars: humanity would no longer be ruled. The Council had underestimated them. And now, the fight for their freedom had only just begun. The hum of the engines resonated through Captain Mara Quinn's bones as the fleet moved silently toward its target. Outside the command bridge's viewport, the stars streaked past in streaks of white and blue, blinding, infinite, and utterly indifferent to the battle humanity was about to wage. The weight of the decision to defy the Galactic Council rested heavily on her shoulders, but the resolve in her chest burned brighter than any doubt. Approaching the target zone, Lieutenant Tanner called from the navigation station, his voice steady, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. Relay station is coming into view. Heavy ECM interference detected. Mara nodded, her fingers brushing the surface of the command table as she studied the ship's readings. The enemy station, a monolithic structure that orbited a barren planet at the edge of the Council's sector, was massive, capable of controlling communications for the entire fleet. It was heavily shielded, its sensors far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But it wasn't invincible. Focus all fire on the primary defense grid, she ordered. We hit them fast, we hit them hard. I don't want any surprises. Tanner, keep us on course for the relay's blind spot. The crew moved quickly, their actions synchronized. Mara's heart raced, but her mind was sharp. Every second counted. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, was riding on this strike. If they could cripple the Council's ability to communicate, they would have a fleeting moment of freedom, a window for the Resistance to mount their own counterattacks. Course locked in, Tanner confirmed. We're on their blind side. Ready to drop out of FTL in 3, 2, 1. The ship jolted as it decelerated from faster-than-light speed, the stars outside contracting into pinpricks of light as they arrived in real space. The relay station loomed ahead, a great metallic fortress floating against the backdrop of the silent planet. Mara's breath hitched. It was beautiful in its stark, mechanical design, cold and clinical, but beneath that exterior, it was a symbol of the Council's control over the galaxy. And today, she would tear that symbol down. Take out the relay shielding, Mara barked. All heavy weaponry, focus fire. The command rang through the air as the ship's cannons fired. The first barrage of plasma fire lit up the dark space between them and the station. The shield pulses shimmered, absorbing the fire, but the station's defensive systems weren't fast enough to adapt to the barrage. With each successive strike, the shields flickered and weakened. We've got a breach! Lieutenant Rios, the weapons officer, reported, his voice sharp with excitement. Primary shield down to 60%. Second phase ready to launch. Mara's lips curled into a tight smile. They were making progress, but time was still against them. She looked to her left, where Commander Elias was tracking the station's internal systems. Elias, how long before their backup systems kick in? Elias didn't look up from his screen, his fingers tapping away. A few minutes, maybe less. They'll reroute power, bring secondary systems online. But if we keep this pace, we can hit their communications grid directly before they can react. Then we move now, Mara said, her voice cool and commanding. Prepare to board the station. I need a team ready to secure the comm room. The bridge went silent as the crew processed the order. The idea of boarding a heavily defended Council station was insane. But they had no choice. Without taking control of the communication hub, the strike would be pointless. They needed to shut down the entire station's ability to alert the rest of the fleet. A few moments later, a fresh wave of explosions rocked the station, and its shields collapsed entirely. The structure's frame groaned as it withstood the final blast before giving way to Mara's order. Transporters activate, she commanded. In the cramped corridors of the transport shuttle, Mara's pulse quickened as the bridge crew prepared for the insertion. The gravity of the situation settled in. This was it. No turning back. Her thoughts briefly flashed to Earth, to the faces of those who had entrusted her with their hopes. She would not fail them. The shuttle's engines roared to life as it shot through the void, racing toward the station's docking bay. The sight of the station grew ever larger, its metal surface gleaming coldly against the backdrop of space. Inside the shuttle, Commander Elias leaned toward Mara. We hit the control room and shut everything down, right? Mara met his gaze, her face set. We hit the control room. We disable their comms. We make sure they can't call for reinforcements. A sharp thud echoed as the shuttle docked with the station. The hatch opened with a hiss, and the crew of soldiers stepped into the cold, metallic hallway. They moved in formation, weapons drawn, every step deliberate. The station was silent, eerily so, but Mara could feel the weight of the enemy just beyond the walls. The station's security systems would be active. The Chaz-Sari wouldn't give up so easily. Approaching the control room, Elias whispered, his hand on the door panel. The moment he activated it, a hiss sounded as the blast doors slid open. Inside, the station's comm hub was bathed in sterile white light. The console hummed with activity, but the screens flickered with static, proof that their efforts had been successful so far. Mara's boots clicked on the floor as she stepped forward, her rifle raised. We're not alone, Elias murmured. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, a group of Chaz-Sari soldiers, their shimmering forms visible in the low light, began to emerge from the shadows. They were faster than humans, more agile. But they didn't have the edge of unpredictability that humanity did. Without hesitation, Mara raised her weapon and fired. The first Chazari fell, his translucent body vaporized by the high-caliber rounds. The others hesitated, momentarily stunned by the ferocity of the attack. "Get to the control panel!" Mara shouted as the team opened fire. Their weapons buzzed with energy, disintegrating their targets one by one. Elias charged forward, slamming his fist into the control panel. Sparks flew, and the screens went dark, the entire system locking down. The hum of the comms died. Mara didn't breathe until the last Chazari fell, its body hitting the floor with a heavy thud. She looked around the room, taking in the devastation. Their victory, hard-earned but worth every second. "We've done it," Elias said, breathing heavily. Mara nodded, looking out into the void through the station's viewport. It wasn't over. The message had been sent. Earth wasn't going to bend to the will of the Galactic Council. They had sent a spark into the galaxy, and now it was time for that spark to catch fire. "We've only just begun," Mara replied, her voice fierce. The war for Earth's freedom had only just begun.